just gonna start the recording anyways. I'll edit it later. How's your quarantine going?
Yeah, it's fine.
Good. Okay, so let's start with your backgrounds. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now. Kind of give my audience some familiarity with who you are.
All right. I'm currently a CTO for a small financial institution called Certain Capital. But I came here through a long, I'd say, career in computing and programming. So I've always been passionate about computing since I bought my first Commodore 64 back in the 80s. And since then I've always been programming pretty much, even when I've been changing roles and I've been through more team leading senior roles. I've always liked to keep at least one hand on the keyboard because that's my passion in the end. So that's what I like. So I've gone through, I would say, from a technical point of view, I come mainly from, I would say, a Microsoft background throughout the years. So I moved starting from basic when I was a teenager to C, C++. And then I pretty much started on .NET when .NET came out. And most of my professional career has been on .NET, although in the last few years, I've been doing quite a lot of Python, mainly because I've always worked in financial institutions throughout my career, and I'm relatively close to I would say, financial mathematical software to perform risk calculations. So that's where it's going. I mean, in the last few years, most financial institutions, at least in calculation systems, have moved a little bit towards Python, also because it's more understandable for the business users. And so that's what I've been doing. And recently, I've moved completely with my current role. I've moved completely to a completely different environment. So I've been doing AWS, so pretty much cloud computing, doing quite a lot of serverless, basically, yeah, developing serverless applications with my team. So that's where I am. As I said, I've always been passionate about computing, so and about programming particularly. So I've always been reading articles and especially books on the latest tech. And blockchain happened to be one of the latest techs a few years ago. So in that period, I was very interested. To be honest, about blockchain, I'd say the crypto world in general, I've been on and off on it because I was relatively interested around 2012, 13, when the first Bitcoin, I would say, rally came up. I'd read a little bit about it, and then I would say, as probably it's happened for quite a few people that have been, they got interested, hooked up into blockchain in 2017. Probably they got a little bit cold in 2018 and 19. So the same happened to me back in 2013. So after the kind of crash of 2013, I lost a little bit of interest because I thought, well, if it's crashed, probably the technology is not there yet. So I got a bit away a bit, and I got interested in other things, more machine learning, other things. And then I got hooked back into it when Ethereum came out. So I followed it like from afar, like reading articles and things, but I never spent too much time on it until 2000, probably 15, started interesting because you could see actually the platform coming up and being used, and that's how I started to learn about Ethereum.
Awesome. And then
So that's pretty much.
and your interest, it peaked with, I guess, with Ethereum, right? And the whole DApp ecosystem, because you wrote a book called Building Ethereum Dapps, correct?
Exact, yeah, correct. So what happened there is that, as I was saying earlier, I've always been reading lots of programming books because that's what I like in general.
Mm-hmm.
And for this topic, I couldn't find much content because obviously it was a really cutting edge content. There weren't many sources apart from, I would say, official documentation that was anyway getting obsolete by the day, and a few blogs out there. So I was trying to learn it by accessing online sources and resources, but it was quite hard at the beginning. So given that, as I said, I was an avid reader of books, so I said, well, let me have a look if there are any books around. There weren't any, and then I thought, well, this is a good idea for writing a book, actually. And actually, I wanted also to share the knowledge I had acquired up to that point to other people in the community, because I found it very frustrating at the beginning to learn about Ethereum. And I said, well, I would like to read the book that I would have loved to buy off the shelves myself. So that's what I did in the end. And I presented, so what I did, I presented a proposal to the publisher, to Manning Publishing, and they thought it was also good timing for the book because there was growing interest on the topic. And I pretty much collected all the sources I found in an organized way, and I presented it as a list of content, and the proposal got accepted. And then since then, so I got support from them straight away, and basically I started to write like 1 week later, pretty much. The book took around 18 months, I would say. I went relatively fast. Also because I knew that I had to go fast because there were lots of people demanding, that kind of book. It was around mid 2017. And then I was relatively lucky that the launch of the ebook came in December 2017, January 2018, when it was practically the boom, just before the bust of that phase. And so, yeah, the book got very popular in that period, and then it kept up, throughout the last couple of years, kind of with relatively, steady sales. So it was, and there is still a demand, especially in the last couple of months. I've seen there's been a new spike because of the spike in the cryptocurrency. It seems to be a bit correlated as well. When the value of cryptocurrencies goes up, then the interest goes up as well.
When you had to write your book in 18 months, did you have all that information? Like, did you know what you were going to write about, or did you really have to dig in and do more research?
So what I had in mind was, I would say the final. I had in mind what I wanted to write about, which was how to write a back-to-back, the app based on the Ethereum blockchain, but including every single bit of the tech stack. So pretty much from the back end, the smart contract to the front end, through the UI. So I could complete the app, which is not what I found even later on. There's been more books that have come up in the last few years, and they've always been either slightly specialized on smart contracts or just on the platform itself. And so my book has got a bit of a slightly different angle in the let's say in the offering of books of Ethereum. But so this is what I wanted to write about, how to write a full DApp, but I wanted to cover pretty much everything from scratch for any developer, I would say, anyone who had some sort of coding skills, minimum coding skills, but zero knowledge of blockchain. So my aim was to make it completely self-contained. And in the end, I achieved that. I mean, I would say I had a list of contents in mind at the beginning. To be honest, I didn't change that much. I would say I cut out things that in my mind became more and more irrelevant as I wrote. And then also I found that, I had in mind to write around 200-300 pages, and then it became almost double the size in the end, because when you start writing and you want to explain, the better you want to explain things to the reader, and you want to make it as obvious as possible, then the more pages you have to write. So that's why I prefer to be as clear as possible and to spend more and more pages on examples and make the experience of the readers as best as possible.
So would you say your book is like pretty technical? Like it really goes into like the details on building an app?
Yes, it is. It is very technical, although he also explains, I would say, it gives a lot of background on everything, on every topic I touch upon. So, for example, the book is pretty much organized in 4 parts. There are 4 sections in the book. So the first section is where I just introduce I would say, the building blocks, all the concepts that you need to understand how to build an application, a decentralized application. So it's basically blockchain technology, a little bit of cryptography around it, smart contracts, what's the Ethereum virtual machine, and then a little bit of I'll say, overview of Ethereum nodes, all the basic technology, I would say, from an infrastructure point of view, that you need to know, then build upon it an application. So in the second part, then I introduced more, I would say, the Solidity language, because you really need, I mean, in the end, when you write a decentralized application, the core of the application is really the smart contract. So that's where I would say 1/4 of the book was focused on. And given the Solidity is a relatively new language, so I decided to also make it very clear for anyone who had just, let's say, JavaScript experience, let's say, and just basic programming. So I went through, also object-oriented topics and everything, pretty much the whole language, with no assumption of any knowledge. And then in the third part is where I started to get on, I would say, on the production aspect of an application. So in the second part of the book, where I presented Solidity, I started to introduce how to write smart contracts. I presented various aspects of smart contracts, not only of the language itself, but how, the elements of a smart contract, and how to organize a smart contract based on multiple classes and so forth. But in the third part is where I covered also a little bit the development environment and the ecosystem outside the developer machine, let's say. So, for instance, I dedicated some some chapters to the Ethereum name services, then decentralized storage networks like IPFS and Swarm, then the development, various aspects of the development environment of a professional Ethereum developer, like the truffle framework, also a little bit of some aspects around testing, how to test your smart contract through, for example, JavaScript Mocha. And then in the last part of the book, I wanted to give some, I would say, food for thought for people who wanted to keep exploring. So I gave an overview of other of alternative, I would say, platforms like Corda, for example. And not only that, I also give a flavor of what are the, I would say, pitfalls when you try to use Ethereum for an enterprise, for example, application that is built on blockchain. So, for example, aspects about the scalability, privacy, and why vanilla Ethereum is not suitable for being used for enterprise applications, but you need actually to use the permissioned variants that they're going through the Ethereum Alliance, for example, like Quorum and other flavors.
It sounds like a good, really comprehensive book if you want that technical knowledge, if you're someone that's a developer in computer science. And for all the research you've done on Ethereum, and obviously writing the book, do you still think that Ethereum is the best platform to build a dApp on? Because there is a lot of competition.
Yeah, so I would say Ethereum in the end is the first platform that was built with the purpose of building any generalized application on blockchain, as opposed to a platform to provide a framework to build a cryptocurrency, which was the majority of, I would say, blockchain projects up to the moment. Ethereum got created. So in the end, although there have been a few various attempts, to replicate Ethereum, like Neo or, for example, Cardano, they're similar, but I mean, they're not innovating that much on the top of what Ethereum already offers. So they're just different flavors, variants with different quirks. But in the end, the real innovation was introduced by Ethereum. And in the end, that's still the biggest community, I would say, comparable to the followers of Bitcoin in terms of numbers. But I would say for the development of applications, of blockchain application, is probably the largest community. So I think still Ethereum can be considered, also in terms of research and development of the core infrastructure, is still the platform that is still seen as a landmark. So perhaps other platforms are trying to copy a little bit what's being done on Ethereum. So at the moment, yeah, I would say still Ethereum is probably the best bet for someone who wants to, to come into this space.
Yeah, Ethereum's definitely been able to, be that juggernaut for dApps in the space because it was the first on the scene, right? It was the first one on the block to really do this, and it's kind of held that for a while. And it's produced a lot of dApps. Do you have one that's your favorite or that you like, or do you think it's a good example?
Yeah, so I would say, I have to admit, there is still not, we have not reached the point of a killer app, let's say, as an Amazon for the web or Google, or for the mobile like WhatsApp, or we have not reached that point yet, and probably that's why there is still a little bit of instability around blockchain development, because there is a little bit of, there are still high expectations on what you can achieve with it. But the problem is the technology is still not there, I think. There is still a great deal of development that needs to be done in order to make, the technology viable for day-to-day applications. However, I have to say, rather than a single application, I have to say, there are a couple of, I would say, applications at the moment that are, let's say, gaining traction. And you can see that even from the value of some cryptocurrencies underlying those projects. For example, one of them is Chainlink, and it's about integrating off-chain content or data into on-chain applications. So these are so-called oracles that make sure that the data that is being imported into a blockchain application has been validated, is correct, and so forth, because otherwise you jeopardize the whole point of a blockchain application that is immutable when the data, it's not right. So those are the kind of that perhaps are gaining a little bit more traction recently. And it's because also they have to do with the decentralized finance that relies obviously on real data, on real world data that has to be needs to be processed in one form or another. Aside from that, say there are a few initiatives that try to improve, I would say, the limitations of the Ethereum platform from a privacy and a scalability point of view, the so-called level 2 technologies. So there are, I would say, two groups of applications. One which have to do with the payment and state channels, and I would say the biggest representatives of these are perhaps the Raiden and micro Raiden applications. And then on side chains, so this is another technique to improve the performance of the Ethereum, of any blockchain in general, but specifically for Ethereum, while infrastructural changes are being developed at the core by the core Ethereum team. So around this, one of the main projects is the plasma technology, and one of the main projects are Loom and OMG. But I have to say that, for example, if you look at the recent values, at the recent rally in cryptocurrency, they've been left a little bit behind. So I would have expected those projects to take up a little bit more. I mean, they've kind of doubled in values in the last few months. But for example, Chainlink has gone like 10 times the value that had in a couple of months ago. So you can say where the focus is at the moment. I think in the end, it also depends on level 1 changes that will be implemented in the next few months, couple of years. So level 1 modifications are what is part of Serenity, the new phase of the infrastructure, let's say, development that is being done around Ethereum. I'd say another kind of exciting innovation will be around languages itself, because although Solidity is perhaps now the most popular language, in future the target is to have WebAssembly languages being native into Ethereum. So so people will be able to develop in C, C++, Rust, or even C# and Java in a second phase. So that will make, I'd say, blockchain development overall easier for any developer that wants to come into this space, because they won't have to learn a new language with different quirks and different specific aspects. They can pick up any language they're familiar with pretty much.
Yeah, Chainlink has been really interesting lately. It's been all over the crypto news, and it's way up there in the coin market cap. Do you know what's been going on? Why it's been making so much ground and progress?
I know that back in July they introduced a program to attract more developer into it. So they are rewarding more developers,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently it got quite a bit of traction. So the point is that it's the usual chicken and egg problem, where if you haven't got a mass of developers that are in your ecosystem, then it's quite hard to to promise that your ecosystem will be the best one. But they've managed to attract quite a few people into their ecosystem. So I think they've reached that kind of mass, and the market has realized it, and now that the market is thinking, okay, there is some traction here, there is some inertia, and probably that platform can take off now going forward. So that will make easier, as I said before, to integrate real world data into blockchain application, which was something that was really needed to make a real world blockchain application viable, because although there are various applications that don't require much outside the input, like the typical blockchain, I would say, case that has been put forward, like applications which just care about making sure you have a public ID based on a private key, and that marks like some provenance. That was a classic use case for blockchain. But then people thought, well, we want a little bit more than that if we want to, make this technology interesting for a larger part of the population. So that's why it was important to have a technology to connect real world data on blockchain technology.
Gotcha. Well, final question. What do you think the potential use cases are for dApps beyond where they are right now? Like how can a company or a government per se, leverage um, dApps as a technology? Like what could they do with it?
I think what's happening. For instance, I've been involved in a couple of projects by a couple of major investment banks. But what companies tend to do at the moment, they don't want to over bet on it, so they try to do localized like proof of concept, and they don't even want to expose themselves too much on it, because it's like a bit of a poker game sometimes. For instance, lots of these projects have been developed in collaboration among different players in the same industry, also to reduce costs, because there is a lot of experimentation needed for these projects. So you tend to find that in this consortium that are developing real, proof of concepts that will be used in one form or another. The problem is that you find that generally a couple of players that are really keen in in exploring, writing code and so forth, and others that are just there just to see what's going on, and they take more of a sit back, approach, and they're just there to see what's going on, So they don't get out of the loop, but they don't want to invest in it time and resources. So and sometimes these projects get a bit frustrating also for some of the members, because they would like more collaborative, effort. So I would say we're still in that kind of stage, and I think it's because I think most players have realized that the technology still need to be refined if you want to heavily invest on it. So I think we'll see for another few months, or at least until the foundations of Serenity are more solid. Still relatively, small level exploration, and perhaps more level 2 technology popping up. So technologies that are just built on the top of the current core blockchain, rather than something completely revolutionary. And perhaps probably in the next 12 months or so, at the end of the next 1 month, probably we might see, depending on how Serenity evolves, companies will move more heavily into it, because they will have a better vision of what can be achieved.
Yeah, I think we're getting very close to seeing a lot more companies, and even parts of government, even at the state level in the US, seeing more real world use cases and applications. We're getting very, very close to that. But for the aspiring, developers out there, where can they find your book?
So the book is available in Amazon, it's obviously in some major bookshops, but on Amazon and every major online retailer, book retailer should have it as well, and also from the publisher themselves, manning.com. The book is available from there.
Awesome. Well, what's a good
and
way?
It's available both in.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's available both in ebook format and also in paper format for who read them via paper.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's a good way for people to keep up with you? Is it, do you have a website, a blog, social media?
I generally, for readers that get through the book, then they can, there is an initiative there that's called Live Book, so they can even message me through the book forum. So once they got the book. In general, I don't tend to have a kind of social media presence because of a choice I made a few years ago. But so I would say that's the best way if they're really interested in the book. I'm happy to.
Awesome. I'll be sure to put a bunch of links in the description for the episode as well, so people will know, how to quickly check out your book. And I believe Manning will probably give me some codes as well, so I'll talk to them. But Roberto, thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast and talk about your book and your experience and what you've done a little bit in the space and your knowledge. I think a lot of people will find it very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brandon. It was a pleasure for myself as well.
Me too. Have a nice day. Stay safe in quarantine.